Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Hey folks, welcome to the program. I'm Scotty Roberts. This is my show, the Intrepid radio broadcast, right here on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. You can also see it over on my Facebook page. That's facebook.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts, all spelled out, Mr. And I think you can see it also over on my... I may not have it hooked up to Instagram yet, but you can also see it over on my... Why am I getting an echo? I've got something feeding back to me, and I don't know what it is quite yet. I'm looking for it. So you can... I know what it is. There it is. It's the thing that doesn't connect to the radio station anymore because the radio station's not there anymore. So, but the software pops up, and it'll start feeding back on me. So welcome, everybody. Susie Q, good to see you. Randall Flagg, and I don't hear one. Yeah, it's not playing over on the radio station right now. So are you hearing me all right? I hope so. Things got unplugged yesterday, but they seem to be okay today. Roger Rabbit, good to see you over there in the chat room. Nice that everybody's coming in. Glad to have you here. And how is your Monday treating you after your weekend? I trust you had a good weekend, and we were out in the sun quite a bit. I think the older I get, I'm getting these kind of freckly brown tanning, when I get sun, and it's just weird. But the more sunburned I get, the more my nose looks regular color. So it's okay. So we were out doing the little fair, the local, not the fair, it was a carnival, pea soup days here in Somerset, Wisconsin. And so the scouts, which Rainey and is part of it, and the kids, they were serving up big vats of homemade pea soup, really good stuff. And that's how they raise money. For going to camps and giving. That's why they can afford to do some of the things that they do. So that was a lot of fun, and I got to go out and do a little street hawking, barking from the dunk tank, which they also had. $2 for a ball, $5 for 3 balls, and you can dunk whoever's in the tank. And so we had a good day with that. And so it's good to see you all here. Roger Rabbit says, well, we're now baby duck parents as of today. Orphan baby duck showed up. Kinsey has a new best friend already. That's pretty cool. How is that duck interacting with everybody? Friendly, I do hope, baby duck. And and right after that, Susie Q says taco salad. Duck tacos? I hope not. Must grab my dinner. So all of you, as you're gathering, welcome. Glad to have you here on a Monday night. And I hope everything's going well for your day. And we're going to kind of dive into it with all the stuff that's going on nowadays with, it's election season. And I got to tell you, do I say this every election? I'm asking myself. Or am I just noticing it more? They just seem crappier and crappier and shittier and ickier. It's just no fun sitting and watching politics these days unless your fun is watching your side degrade the other side the best. And that kind of bothers me. Now, I know we've always had negative politics, and you've always had the candidates going at each other's throats. And as a matter of fact, a century ago, some of the things that were said in political fights for the presidency, were pretty lowbrow stuff. And so, duck, tuck, taco. I mean goose, says Susie Q. To hell with politics, says Elderberry. Let's get out in nature. Yeah, I would love to do that some more. I think it would be fantastic. I've got my good friend Carr, who they bought an Airstream a few years ago, one of the old silver ones. I don't know if it was new or if it's a classic that they bought, but they go out now, and he's a writer. He's doing some writing, and he and his wife, they head out in their Airstream and they go to some of the campgrounds. And he was working on a book about the great dog and pet parks around the country. That was a few years ago. I don't think he's working on that now, unless it's off to the back burner. But I love the pictures he sends. He's a photographer, amongst other things, creative, and sends some really nice pictures of their out in their silver Airstream and some of the things they do out there. My daughter Abby just went. They live, as you know, my mermaid daughters. They live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Abby and her man Dakota. They went out into somewhere in southeastern Ohio to a friend of his, and Dakota is a cartographer and a surveyor, things like that. And he's also a bluegrass banjo player, probably guitar too, and he's fantastic. And but he's got a friend who does some bluegrass, and and they're all into. He's got a podcast on Sasquatch and Bigfoot. My son-in-law, Dakota, and I couldn't tell you what it is right now. I happen upon it every now and then and go, oh, I don't know how to find this on a regular basis. But I'll find that and I'll get it to you. But they went out, and they had a friend of theirs had a, what did they call it? It was Music and Sasquatch, only it was two S's. Now I can't think of what it was. It wasn't bluegrass and Sasquatch, but it was something like that. And they had a little festival out there. Had a couple hundred people show up, she said. But their friend is a naturalist, and he works out in the forests and in the trees. And he took them out, and she showed some pictures of them turning up rocks in the streams and all these little animals they were finding out in the woods in Ohio, from little itty bitty tiny frogs you see the palm of her hand, these little tiny lizards, salamander. I don't know if they were baby salamander. I don't know what they were. Little tiny crawdads, things like that. And it was very beautiful. She had some music playing to this collage of photos of the things that they ran across. So Elderberry, you're right. Getting out in nature could be a really, I think, an amazing thing to do. And my daughter proved that this weekend. Just the little things like that, hiking in the woods, overturning certain rocks, finding things, and being really in a peaceful place with the nature around them. And I like that. I remember one of the last really good feelings I had like that out in nature. We were up hiking above Gooseberry Falls in Minnesota. If any of you know of the North Shore of Lake Superior up there, it starts to get like the big cliffed rocky coasts up on the North Shore. It would be as Lake Superior comes in, if you're looking at me, it would come in like this, Lake Superior down to Duluth down here, and you drive up the west side of the lake and to get to and up that North Shore of Minnesota. And Gooseberry is one of the state parks up there, and there's falls, the cascading, stepped falls that are up there is really gorgeous. But you can go back in there, you can hike back for miles on the creek along the river, and not the creek, the river. And so it was, I remember being up there and the smells of the woods up there, because you've got not just the flowering plants and all the greenery and the trees and the river itself. You've got the smells from the lake, from Superior. And it's the smell in the air up there. Smell makes it sound like it's a negative. It's not. It's the aroma up there of the North Shore in that what they call the Minnesota Arrowhead that goes up the northwest side of Lake Superior. Just gorgeous up there. And so, yeah, I want to do a little bit more of that. I want to get outside. We're trying to get out and do some camping. I wanted to go for the second week in July to try to get up to drive out and go camping out in the end of the Dakotas and just west of here, Minnesota, and then you got North and South Dakota, and then on the other side is Montana and Wyoming, and go right at the northeastern tip of Wyoming is, of course, the Little Bighorn, and I wanted to go there. Steph heard Bigfoot, she said. Steph Squatch says, who said that to Steph? Oh, it was Randall Flagg, Steph Squatch. Leslie Holker says, I love our walks and sitting in front of our water, watching the swans dance across the water, listening to the loons, nothing more beautiful. I have a memory of when I was about 11 or 12 years old. The older fellow who was younger than I am now, who was my mentor, he was fireplace builder and all of that. I've talked about him before. We went out to a little lake up north of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and maybe Leslie, you'd be the only one who would have any context to it that's listening here tonight. But up north if you went straight north of Minneapolis-St. Paul, I don't know what the lake was called anymore. It's by Mora, Minnesota, I think it was. And there was this little lake sitting out. As we were finishing up our work, I went out on the end of the dock with the old man's dog, whose house we were working on. And as it got dark, it was just beautiful, watching the sunrise on the water. And then there was one other time where I remember this. My wife, Suzanne, my first wife, yes, as you all know, I've been married. Rainey is my third wife, but I was married from 82 to 88 when I was in my seminary and ministry days. She left the marriage, and then I ended up a couple of years later marrying Annette, which is the mother of my 3 older children, my twin daughters, and Sam, who you know. And then we were divorced after 12 years. And I met Rainey 4 or 5 years after that. And of course, the rest is history. You know that story. But Suzanne and I, when we were married, we took a little vacation that first month that we were married because we really couldn't afford a honeymoon. And we went up to the North Shore again. Only we veered off over and we went to northern Minnesota. We went up to Lake of the Woods. If you look at a map of Minnesota, and you see that little knob that sticks up on the map on the top of Minnesota, the north border that borders into Canada. We were right up in there on a little place in near the Boundary Waters canoe area. And we were at a place called Dogtooth Lake, and we went fishing. We were in a canoe and did our fishing and all of that. And yeah, marriage is the leading cause of divorce, Professor Bauer. Thank you for that. It is indeed. And there was at night, there was no lights out there. We were out in the wild in a tent, kind of semi-wild, meaning you could hop in the car in 10 minutes, you were in a little town, not far from there, but not even a city. It was a town. And it got so dark that you couldn't really see, but your eyes adjusted to it. And out on the lake in the grayness of the nighttime, you could see, if there'd been a full moon, you probably could have seen it better, but you could see a little line tracing across the water. And it was a loon because you could hear the loon calling. And Leslie, you made me think of that. That was, oh my God, that was in 1982. So that was 42 years ago. I remember that. And we were sitting out, and you could hear the loons, and it was echoing off the water and the pine trees all around. It was gorgeous, gorgeous setting. So Knife Lake is in Mora. We went way up north of there. Maybe that was it, Leslie. I don't know. It was a little round lake, and I wish I could tell you where it was exactly, and I can't. And well, now I may have mixed that up. Now I'm thinking, because I can see the directions we took in my head, My old man mentor, they lived up in East Bethel, Minnesota, and we veered off the road there and went to a little lake out there. So I had the location all wrong, but it was still nonetheless beautiful. And I want to um, segue, if I might, into something um, mysticism. We've talked about mysticism on the show. We've talked about religion. We've talked about political philosophy. And I wanted to look into mysticism and political philosophy combined. It's this idea of linking spiritualism, which you might be able to get a sense of that by we're talking about the outdoors and some of the beauty of that, and the closer to nature you get, sometimes the closer to spirit you feel. So maybe we can take that and use it as a kind of a link over to linking spiritism with political philosophy and play together. At first sight, it sounds kind of rash. What could they possibly have in common, since they're clearly not the same thing? So let's sit back and put on our thinking caps a little bit, our spiritualist caps, maybe a bit of our mysticism caps, and let's talk about this a little bit, because spiritualism seems to me to be absolutely right on all of its mystical side of things. The supernatural part of it seems to be quite natural to me. I've always said the supernatural is really just the natural in areas that we don't seem to understand or experience quite as much. So the incredible part of it seems to me obviously to be true, but I think it's so far dangerous or unsatisfactory that it's in the same degree scientific. It inquires whether its gods are worth inquiring into. A man of a certain age may look into the eyes of his lady love to see that they are beautiful. But no normal lady is going to allow that young man to look into her eyes to see whether they're beautiful. The same vanity and idiosyncrasy has been generally observed in gods. You praise them or you leave them alone. And so this is what I meant by the woman. She'll not necessarily just let any old person stare into her eyes to see the beauty there, only certain ones. And so gods, praise them or leave them alone. But don't look for them unless you know what they are or that they are even there. Don't look for them unless you want them. It annoys them very much. That's something G.K. Chesterton said about spiritualism. And God as being beyond experience, that is, the primacy of a God over religion. If God is a being in and of himself, independent of his being experienced by man, and if we know about this being from what's revealed in Torah, the Bible, New Testament, Old Testament, pick any religion, the Quran, if this is how we know God and prophecy, then the theoretical exposition of that which is known as possible in principle, which means theology, to this extent, theology is the expression of simple and unambiguous piety. Leo Strauss said that in his work, The Holy. So all of that from older authors there to link spiritualism, political philosophy, and play together is at first sight rash. What could they possibly have in common? Mysticism relates to our contact, if we have any, with the mysterion. Think about that one for a minute, Professor Bauer. Maybe we can talk about that in a little bit. The mysterion, with the mystery that lies at the threshold or the ground of all finite things, among which we are finite things. Religion is a natural virtue. It's pietas, an aspect of justice. It's our effort properly to relate ourselves to God as the origin of our existence in terms of what we quote unquote owe for what we are and receive, and something obvious that can never be fully repaid. And this latter fact of our inability adequately to respond to the reason of our being is why the virtue of religion is related to, but not exactly the same as the virtue of justice. Justice seeks to repay exactly what is due, while religion thus is conceived as related to justice, yet something beyond it, a kind of nobler effort to do what we can for what we are, an expression of our acknowledgement that we exist as finite beings. Leslie says over in the chat room, spirituality is a natural virtue. Religion, not so much. I agree with you, Leslie, that spirituality is a natural virtue, but religion, not so much. Religion is practice. Religion is ritual. It's the fixtures we put in place to try to express our spirituality in one form or another. So, you know what? Religion is an expression, spirituality is an expression of our acknowledgement that we exist as finite beings. We don't exist in mere justice, which is at the root of the word, same root of the word. And if we existed in justice, it would mean that God, out of some deficiency in himself, owed us the to be that we possess. And that keeps us out of nothingness. See where I'm going with that? I don't mean to be so twisty with this, but something that we are intuitively aware that we cannot do for ourselves. So it would also mean that we could adequately repay the good of existence itself that's been granted to us by the cause of our existence. So in this sense, it would imply that we ourselves are equal to the Godhead. A dubious proposition, but tempting to human nature. We are all gods. We are all our own gods. We are all comprised of the same stuff that the Godhead is comprised of. How tempting for us. And already here is the sense that existence itself is something that's rooted in an abundance, or even a superabundance, as Aquinas said, a realm of non-necessity, yet of real spiritual and even material depth that may indeed have much to do with the strange vastness of the cosmos itself. Even natural religion hints in its sense of its own inadequacy, that for comprehension of this particular reality, what we deal with approaches love, something simply given, not something that is owed. That's worship, that's religion, that or spirituality, and so on. But as Leo Strauss said, God is primary even over religion, over our natural understanding of how, with rites and our minds and our disciplines, to relate ourselves to what is not ours to establish or fully to define with our own powers. Natural mysticism is the experience of being taken up into the mystery of what is, whatever it is. Still, we can't, we don't have this, attain this priori exclusion of the possibility that the mystery we seek to know will first seek us. That it all itself contains the plenitude of being that we call person or even persons. And even in the book of Psalms, it says, we cannot he who made the ear not hear. So this fact that God is primary over religion touches on the mystery that might explain that classical question that we each have to ask at the risk of not being what we are is, why do I exist? Why am I not something else? Why does everything possible not exist? Why am I not a moth or a lizard or a 1-inch crawdad in the river? Why am I not something else? Why am I who I am and what I am? And the very fact of these questions, which are just primal in nature to humanity, brings up the Aristotelian question of whether the world was made in vain, whether God, however you see him, is God lonely? If the world is indeed made in vain, no further questions need to be asked, nor are they even sensible. But if those kinds of questions aren't in vain, we have to be alert and listen and consider what's proposed, even from Revelation. And if God is lonely, perhaps he needed the world to exist. But perhaps this is not the only explanation of why it exists. Remember, we found that God made man because he wanted somebody to fellowship with. Does that mean God was lonely? Sarah Yusuf says in the chat room, why I exist? God has a wicked sense of humor, she says. So that one just caught my eye. And there's other good comments over there. We'll get to some of those in a bit. Moving on, likewise, we need a criterion to be sure that to which we orient ourselves is not diabolical, or granted that there's both good and evil spirits to which we might be attracted. And the fascination of evil, both. I was looking through just tattoo art today, as I'm still working very strongly now, developing my tattooing skills. And the amount of things that come across as evil depictions is very popular in tattooing. Skulls and knives. And if you're looking into the 3D stuff, I saw some great 3D stuff where skin is ripped open and you see some kind of evil being trying to claw its way out. Those kind of that darkness of creativity is something that's predominant, that's out there. And the fascination of evil, both the attraction to it, the naming of it, isn't something that can be adequately accounted for by the simple denial of its existence. Thus, piety has the connotation of an orientation to a true God, an awareness of the fact that false gods and false prophets can rise up among us, even in political terms. So this reflection brings up the further philosophical question, and I think it's a philosophical, not theological question, of whether there be any criterion by which we might be protected from making such a mistake of identifying what is in fact evil with what is good. Now, does that fit into today's political narrative or not? We're going to go a little deeper with this. Evil is subjective, says Sarah. Is good then subjective? Is it subjective in nature? Sarah, I'm asking you this question to see what you think. Is it subjective in its own nature, or the nature of good and evil subjective, or is the interpretation of good and evil subjective? The taking in of something and processing it as either good or evil? That's a good question. Is evil subjective? I would put that. Is good subjective? So the historical function of dogma, I suggest, it kind of falls within this area. Just why is not a suicide bomber who, in all sincerity, successfully kills himself and 100 others in a presumed name of his deity as noble and holy as any other witness to the divinity? Does he believe in what he's doing, or is he like, I'm going to go kill people with this bomb strapped to my abdomen because I am evil? Or is he doing it because he believes he's doing something for his God? He believes he is in the right. He's as noble and holy as any other witness to divinity in his own eyes. So the only real answer to this question is that there's no, or that there's a natural law that grace presupposes nature. If our theology gives us a God who is pure, with no roots in being, what is good is simply arbitrary and can become evil simply by active will. Sarah says that evil is a judgment of a perspective. It can be something that could be good, could become evil just simply by the act of our will. The political order acknowledges that we're mortal beings whose activities in this world reveal our souls. And the political life is man's proper life, though not his highest life. The political life, as such, by being itself, points to something beyond itself. It's adequate for what it's capable of doing, but not for doing everything related to human purpose and destiny. So if mankind were the highest being, Aristotle told us this, politics would be the highest science. But man is not the highest being, yet he is open through the very nature of his intellect to the highest science, to a knowledge of the reality which he does not constitute. Oof! How's that strike you? Leslie Holker in the chat room says, if you're doing something that you feel is wrong, chances are pretty good it's because evil, wrong, hurtful, in my opinion, are all the same. Intention of evil, says Susie Q. She adds in. So, as Aristotle also said, one of the candidates for the definition of human happiness is political power and honor. Modern ideology, in one sense, is a mystical absorption into the vision of man for himself. Autonomous man who spends his energy on what it is to be human, even seeking to reconstruct it so that it would supposedly be more human than the being given by nature, by history, nature, or nature's God. So when this worldly mysticism occurs, the world is closed off from the divine, from the transcendent what is. But the underside of politics, its normalcy and necessity, as it were, its fragility, as Thucydides taught us in the plague and the revolution of Corcyra. I have too many words strung together that I need to pronounce, so pardon me for that. It's seen most clearly when political order breaks down. Hobbes's bellum omnium contra omnes, there's your Latin for the day, generally happens when a political order breaks down from natural or political causes. The coercive force of law is also needed for most people for virtue, not as its essence, but as its support. In a natural or political or military disaster, when the infrastructure of a society is almost completely destroyed, we see astonishing things. Robberies, lootings, killings, greed, selfishness, they all come to the fore. And we usually also see acts of heroism and generosity, though often there's no criterion or willingness for distinguishing the two. So when the normal structures of a city are destroyed and the political leadership overwhelmed, corrupt, or incompetent, we realize that political order is a needed and welcome thing. But it cannot exist without its being created, maintained, and fostered, and even nurtured. Man is by nature a political animal. Means, and I put that in quotes, man is by nature a political animal, quote unquote. Means at least that he needs to build a city that is a constitution, an order of law, and a procedure by which the necessities of life are provided for and maintained. We have no right to this order apart from our efforts to bring the city forward and maintain it. And some regimes in their structure, as Aristotle constantly noted, are better than others, both absolutely and relatively. Now, let's look at this other thing, this play, which I've kind of tied the mysticism, political ideology to play. Play, yeah, yes, Sarah, all relationships need attention and energy. Very true. Positive attention and energy, adds Leslie in the chat room. So play, like creation itself, indicates what before us is unnecessary yet fascinating. Aristotle said that play was like contemplation, as it also was something for its own sake. Play is for its own sake, something beyond necessity, nor is everything for something else. At the end of the game, we have time for praise and celebration, even for the honorable losers. The loser does not abdicate his humanity by losing, but learns another side of reality, what it means not to win. And so the loser also plays according to rules. He's necessary to the game, the loser. And this realization suggests that the order of the universe contains what happens in it in order that the full scope of being might be manifest. And at the heart of disorder is the reality of freedom. Get that? Let me repeat that. At the heart of disorder is the reality of freedom, such that the freedom to reject the good must be contained within the whole's purpose and be ordered to it. So wherever this story is told, Socrates said to the jurors who voted for his condemnation at his trial that they would be remembered as those who voted to kill the philosopher. He was right, of course, and without their vote, we perhaps should never have had Plato and all he brought into the world. Yet he was a terrible but a free vote. Think of current events that are going on and make your comparisons. Terrible but free, and how they open the door to other things. Games are not played for the primary purpose of the exercise of those who play them. They're played for themselves. They're played to win. In their unfolding and their completion, they're what's fascinating. They need not be, but they are. Games belong to the realm of superabundance. We do not need them to keep ourselves alive as we need food and water and shelter. But we delight in those things because of what they are. The grass that grows on ball fields is not lawn, nor do sheep graze on those grasses. Insofar as it's not today artificial, you could have artificial turf. But half the world watches the Olympics or the World Cup, and most of the nation watches the NCAA basketball finals or the Super Bowl. And the British watch the British Open, and the Australians the Melbourne Cup. It's not because they have nothing else productive to do. The spectators are there to see what unravels before them. The players are there to see who wins, the chance of life, the product of training, of manicuring, of making something work according to the rules. And so the referees are there to enforce the rules so that the game is still the game. So here's something. Why is it in G.K. Chesterton's why am I feel like I'm slurring. Chesterton's happy phrase that no normal lady will allow a gentleman to look into her eyes to see whether they're beautiful, but will allow it because he sees that they are beautiful? Why is it that beauty, like thingness, one truth and good is this transcendental and affirmation of being. Omniens est verum et bonum quodvicium placet, if you know your Latin. The predicate adds to the subject that already is a relation to mind or will. There is no more to be said of beauty than that it is beautiful, but still, that needs to be said. There are times, even today, and I don't say these things because I don't like to, personally, I don't like the thought of anybody perceiving me as creepy or anything like that. But there are times if I see a beautiful woman, you're tempted to go say, wow, I don't want to say anything else to you other than I don't need anything or mean anything, but other than you're really beautiful to look at, to behold, if you will, if you want to use poetic language. We can't do that nowadays. It's not the same as it used to be. And now the older I get, I notice that young women will appreciate that, or even middle-aged women, or any woman. I've seen elderly women that are incredibly beautiful. And you just want to say, wow. I think I may have, there was an art show that Rainey and I were doing with her booth and her tumblers and our art. And there was an older woman, I think she had to be in her late 70s at best, but incredibly beautiful woman, beautiful eyes, beautiful stature. And I told her, you have got to be one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. And you mean those things. But to say that now, the point that's getting across here and philosophically, and the thing that Chesterton said was that, I'll go through that again. He says that no normal lady will allow a gentleman to look her in the eyes to see whether they are beautiful, but will allow it because he sees, quote unquote, that they are beautiful. So beauty, like thingness, is transcendental. And the predicate adds to the subject that already is a relation to mind or will. There is no more to be said of beauty than that it is beautiful. But still, that needs to be said. And even when we explain beauty's proportion, its radiance, its form, we still recognize that what is there is beyond our explanation. Sometimes we just, that little of awe. That's beautiful. I've done that looking in nature at things. Oh, that's beautiful. I can't say anything else of it other than that is beautiful. And so, knowledge both limits by defining this thing to be not that thing, and opens us to what is still there beyond our definitions. Beauty takes us outside ourselves simply because it's already there. We behold it, we view it, we take it in. We're astonished that something we did not do or create or could even imagine is there right before our eyes. We don't need to create it. We rejoice that what is not ourselves exists, and it does, and as do we behold it. And in so acknowledging, we admit to our being what is not our being. Sounds like a lot of paradoxes here, doesn't it? We admit to our being what is not our being. Our minds are capable of knowing all things, even the things we don't know. And we can be more than we are. How can you be more than that which you're comprised of? Our games need not exist, yet they absorb our attention. In their unfolding, they take us out of ourselves into their own time and place and drama, these games. We're curious about this experience of our loving games almost as much as we're by our experience of loving beauty. I love football. Football is my whole life. You know, it's the old comedy routine, some Saturday night thing. Baseball in my whole life. So often they are the same experience. What a beautiful shot, we'll yell. What a beautiful dive. We're aware of more than simply of what is when we can say of it that it's true or good or beautiful. And so the industry of making football gear, football stadiums, even football rules and regulations doesn't exist before the game. They exist because of the game itself. And the game causes them to be as they are. A great coach or manager knows the rules of the game, and he can talk them, he can recall them, he can argue them to all of his friends and his followers, his listeners, and whatever. But this theoretical knowledge by no means guarantees that he will win the game. As other coaches and managers also know the rules. So we can have the stadium, we can have the rules, we can have the uniforms, we can have the football itself, the coaches, the referees, but still not have the game until the teams are on the field, ready to play, hopefully according to the rules, seeking to win. You see where I'm going with this? This is one big metaphor here. Man is a multi-experienced being. Mankind, we could say. You know, for sake of modern politics, men and women are, or mankind is, humanity, however you want to say it. We work, we pray, we play, we think, we laugh, we make things, we govern, we die. Aristotle said that happiness included a complete life. What's a complete life? Happiness includes a complete life. Remember, once again, Saving Private Ryan, the old man in the beginning, and then it brings you all the way through this whole movie. And if you haven't watched it, there's a little of a spoiler alert here. The old man is Private Ryan, who the Tom Hanks character, the captain, and the others went to find because his 4 other brothers had been killed in battle, and they were going to send him home. And as Tom Hanks' character, the captain, lays dying after having been shot at a air raid in the village that they're there to help stop, he's dying, and he looks at Ryan, who they've spent all this time going to find, this young man. And he pulls him in close, and in his last breath, he says, "Earn this." And Ryan stands up, and then it morphs him back into the old man. And he says to his wife, 70 years later, 60 years later, whatever the time, I can't remember when the movie was, maybe 20 years ago, they're at Normandy. And he's looking at the crosses and finds the grave of this captain. And he looks at his wife, and he's crying. And he says, have I earned this? Have I lived a good life? Am I a good man? Tell me I'm a good man. And so happiness includes a complete life, a well-lived life. He meant, Aristotle, that all of these aspects of his given being ought to be exercised for him and to be what he is. The purpose of the polity, Aristotle also tells us, is not just that we may live, but live well. Not just there be a good, but a common good. The living well is not apart from our own knowing and choosing what it might mean to live well. By his very existence, man finds himself already human, a fact about which he had nothing to do. Man did not first conceive what it is to be a man and then become one. His task then is not to make himself a man, but a good man. Likewise with women, by the way. Man, I'm using as the universal for humanity. We're likewise free to make ourselves bad people, bad men. Not a few do. It's the mark of civilization to be able to tell the difference. The first concern of the legislator, Aristotle told us, is virtue. Virtue. Would you look at our legislators and our rulers today, no matter what form of government they're in? Would you look at them and say, now there's a virtuous batch? Aristotle said that's the first thing, virtue. Yes, JP says in the chat room, repeats it, earn this. So is what happens in the universe closer to games than it is to the workings of machines? What would this similarity between game and universe imply? C.S. Lewis, he wrote Chronicles of Narnia and those, and he used the happy image of the great dance, capital G, capital D, great dance, to describe what goes on in the universe when it finally reaches its purpose. And it's a beatific vision, but it's also an overflow in being, in human being. What seems to be necessity may be closer to doing something again, just for the delight of it. This latter was the great image that Chesterton used of the sun rising each morning. We may think that it's necessary and therefore uninteresting. Chesterton remarked that natural laws may well be more like a child wanting to be thrown up again and again simply because it was delightful. Thrown up into the air, not vomited. Simply because it's delightful. Does the universe have delight? Does it feel delight? We're part of the universe. Do we deem sunrises as being, just normal natural things? They don't feel anything, do they? Do they not? Behind such images is the great theological truth that the world need not be, but it is. This unnecessity brings us to the further question of the reason we have finite, intelligent being in a vast but finite universe. Good night. I love you too. You're beautiful. I love you. Familial interruption. There you go.
Do you not want me to say goodnight?
No, I said that in a good way. Do you not want me to say goodnight? She said. So anyway, behind such images as this, the sunrise, the things that we consider to be natural things, we realize that there are things that don't need to be, but they are. Celebrations, Aristotle said, are for successful achievement, either of body or soul. Now, that's to say that celebrations are left to be begun when all else is done, when we've won. It's not remarkable that the fascination of the game, when we don't know its conclusion, ends in celebration when we do not know how it turns out. This is the arena of the great dance, the definition of God. I am who I am, said God. I am that I am they speak of. Only this existence can explain the great dance. Augustine, in a famous passage in Book 7 of his Confessions, tells the Lord that he has loved him late, quote unquote, perhaps very late, even too late. He confesses to looking for God everywhere among these beautiful things, that he found in his world, but these were not God. Yet Augustine knew that they were beautiful. He later learned that they were also dangerous, or could be. That initial experience seemed enough for a while, yet they did not explain themselves either. The beautiful things, where did their beauty come from? Or as he put it, from whence their beauty? Augustine tells us further that God has ever been present within him, only he did not notice it. He'd been looking in the wrong place. He didn't mean that he was God, that he personally was God. Augustine was quite aware of his own personal finiteness, though it seemed to drive him constantly outside himself, as he himself lacked something even in being what he was. That great paradox again. I am this, but I lack being this. And we might wonder, what on earth was God doing in Augustine's soul? Why would a self-sufficient, all-powerful being bother with turbulent Augustine and his striking vanities? Surely if he were more clearly there, Augustine would not have to look for God elsewhere. If God's there, why do we have to look for him? He thinks that even when he was enjoying the various and beautiful things, he found that they were not God. Still, he was looking for him. He was unaccountably restless. Why? Not just because he was more greedy or unsettled than most, though he probably was. He was perplexed that he found himself looking for something in spite of himself. It's like Elijah being taken to the Old Testament prophet, taken to the cleft of the rock to see God. And it said the storm, the whirlwind came by this cleft in the rock where God had tucked him. And he watches the whirlwind go by, but God was not there. The great fires came, and God was not in the fire. The earthquakes shook the mountain, and God was not in the mountain, or not in the earthquake. And then it says, and after all this was that still small voice. And that's where he found God. So Augustine, his own experience, rightly considered, indicated that something in the actual being that he, Augustine, was, did not encounter an adequate object or fulfillment of presence. He was, but he was not complete in being what he was. This was his reflection on his experience. The places he looked were fine enough, beautiful in fact, but systematically, as he tested them with his own resources, they seemed curiously inadequate. The "is this all there is" syndrome. That was very much uppermost in his mind. And it is an experience that can easily lead to despair, to the suspicion of existing in a world with no meaning, but with a faculty that demands meaning. We live in a world with no meaning, but with a faculty that demands meaning. Augustine can be called a Christian mystic in the tradition of Plato and Plotinus. The scene in the Confessions at the death of his mother, Monica, is proof enough of this. His encounter with things was real enough. Augustine was neither a pantheist nor a stoic who wanted to identify himself with the all that was the world because the world was divine. His quest was not a return from a fallen state to the paradise from which he had been expelled. There was the via negativa, get my Latin right, in Augustine. This is not God, nor is that. Augustine implicitly knew that he would recognize what he was looking for when and if he found it. And just how, he wasn't sure. Thou hast made for us thyself, O Lord. Augustine dimly was aware that his search for God was posterior to God's search for him. This was not a lonely quest, or a quest for aloneness. He knew of pride. He also knew of the city of God. The universe was not filled with God, and Augustine, though evidently everything that is mattered, including Augustine, how a human being matters to God is evident after the manner of what a human being is. The search was face to face, as Paul put it, but both God and man remained what he was in the exchange. But the world itself need not exist. Hence, Augustine didn't need to exist, nor his loves. Again, to recall the play image, Augustine's confessions indicated to him that he had not been playing the game according to the rules inherent in human reality. One must want to be what one is. That's a great t-shirt. One must want to be what one is. Political Augustinianism has never stood for the fact that the most we can expect from the kingdoms of this world is not a whole hell of a lot. At best, it's an effort to keep down the worst in us. And Augustine did not expect too much of politics, but he vividly knew that some regimes were better than others. Augustine, his is a clear and almost brutal description of what goes on among kingdoms and principalities, and even empires and republics too. We're not going to find in any actual polity anything that might be confused with Plato's Republic or the City of God.
Sounds Yoda-ish, says Sarah. I have to get my Yoda down. Been a long...
I sound too much like Cookie Monster when I do Yoda these days. Used to make my kids laugh with it.
You seek Yoda.
Anyway, thank you for that, Sarah. And sounds Yoda-ish, yes. Yet Augustine sought for what Plato alerted us to in his City and Speech. Just because the kingdoms of the world, however necessary and real they were not the locus of this City and Speech. It did not mean that the endeavor to describe it, anticipate it, seek it was in vain. Quite the opposite. One could easily lose himself in this beautiful city in speech. But Augustine was no more Platonist in this sense. His realism was closer to Aristotle. Nor did he think that the mystery of human disorder was located in the fact that we don't know what it meant to be good. Our reason could and did tell us much of this, what it is to be good, quote unquote. Rather, the difficulty was in the fact that knowing what it is to be good, we still aren't. Augustine is not the first great analyst of the will for nothing. The mystery was more in our wonderment about why we did not do what we knew we ought to do. And this perplexity brought him to the Christian context of grace and redemption. That's what was to supply what was lacking. I mentioned it very recently. The Apostle Paul wrote in the New Testament, probably very much along the same lines of thinking that Augustine took on. He said, all the things that I want to do, the good things, meaning, I find myself not doing them. And all the things I don't want to do, I find myself constantly doing them. And he talked about this law of nature that was in him. So, mysticism, political philosophy, and play serve to relate the transcendent to the human through the setting of the cosmos in which we find ourselves. Pope Leo the Great, we're talking in the 400s AD, in a sermon on the Beatitudes, remarked using the words of St. Paul, "What mind can conceive? What words can express the great happiness of seeing God?" Yet human nature will achieve this when it's been transformed so that it sees the Godhead no longer a mirror or an obscurity, but face to face, as Paul said. The Godhead that no man has been able to see. So, in the inexpressible joy of this eternal vision, human nature will possess what eye has not seen, nor ear heard, what man's heart has never conceived. So, I cite this particular passage because it's quite clear about the two aspects of mysticism that we seek to see face to face. The mystical encounter is personal. And that to achieve this purpose, human nature must be transformed, something it cannot do by itself. The passage also understands the limitation and the purpose of words before mystery, their inadequacy and their necessity. All words point to the being to which they refer. No word is the being itself. So this insight posits the paradox of the biblical concept, the Word made flesh, and curious desire to see face to face. The great Logos, the Word, became flesh and dwelt among us. So political philosophy, in its broad extent, accounts for what men do in the cave, what they do during the revolution, during the plague in Athens. That is, it does not allow us to pretend that what men do to each other, to use Machiavelli's famous phrase, it's not a poignant fact of our historical record. If there's to be a redemption, it must be within this context of what has happened and does happen, both through natural disaster and human initiative. On the other hand, once human and civilized living has been established because the city is ordered, human nature is brought to leisure, or leisure if you prefer. That is the question arises, what do we do when the necessities and amenities are provided, even with our own work and cooperation? Aristotle mentions the politician who has himself not learned anything of the intellectual pleasures for what it's worth, knowing and doing for its own sake. He said that such a political man would in all likelihood seek more base pleasures, something that can be easily documented in the biographical history of not a few politicians. Such an observation leads to the less attended fact that perhaps the intellectual and theoretical failures are more dangerous to any polity than natural disorders, and even what are usually called sins of the flesh. So Aristotle had suggested that natural disorders are often the products of moral disorders. Catch that? Natural disorders are often the products of moral disorders. That is, intellectual theories are the result of efforts to justify our actions. This effort can be very subtle and in one sense constitutes the history of philosophy. It is at this point where the question of the dogmas of what God is are most pertinent to the life of the city. Dogmas, it always reminds me of what do you get when you cross a dyslexic theologian with an atheist, insomniac. I know that's a tough one. A dyslexic theologian with an atheist insomniac. A man who lays awake all night contemplating whether there is or is not a dog. Anyway, dogma. So the polity itself is not a subject. It's not a substance. It's not a person, but a relation of order among beings. See you, Barbie D. You must have to go at 10 o'clock at night, 10:10, because about this time you're always out. So thanks for being here, Barbie D. We'll see you next time. It's a relation order among beings, each of whom personally transcends the city's own order. The polity does not and cannot see God face to face or in any other way. What sees, or at least can see, are the individual citizens who bear the reality of the polities of this world. So in this sense, the polity is ordered to what is beyond itself, without itself, therefore, or thereby, becoming unnecessary to the human purposes of the mortals who compose it. The polity cannot survive without at least some who are devoted to things higher than the polity. The place of the mystic in the public order is but an aspect of the place of the philosopher. The politician can rid the polity of such a threat if the contemplative life is perceived as an undermining the actual existing polity. So this is what the state-sanctioned deaths of Socrates and Christ were all about. This dire consequence means that the politician stands at the crossroads between mysticism and human things. The politician can be absorbed in himself, in false gods, in the making of polity itself to be God. In each of these cases, he betrays both his own vocation and the city he is to serve. But even in the virtuous politician, politics points beyond itself. We can hope to render the politician benevolent to the mystic or the philosopher without making him, the politician, to be himself a mystic or a philosopher. But with the advent of the teaching that the purpose of authority is to serve and not be served, and that the love of neighbor is a direct consequence of the love of God, we can and do find politicians who reveal a kind of mystical service to those they serve and support. Mysticism is not merely the participation in the outreaches of the Godhead, as it can be known by man, but also in the relation that the Godhead has to each member of the polity whose dignity indicates the kind of service sometimes required, a service that's both designated to care for the needy and provide order for those who are to take care of themselves. The purpose of government is not itself to care for everyone, but to provide an order in which everyone can care for themselves. Yeah, God doesn't need a starship, but he needs money, according to religion. That's right. Excuse me, what does God need with a starship? Star Trek 5 or 6. 6, I think it was. So it's said by the philosophers that man's happiness consists in contemplation, especially as what is highest to him is divine. That is, what connects him to the gods. That is right. The polity exists for itself, but in achieving what it is, a life of amazing abundance is fostered in which questions of the highest moment are to be considered and answered. In this context, the fascination of play seems at first to have an unimportant place. And what I'm kind of looking to argue here is that rather than play provides us with a better understanding of what is left to be done when the polity itself is what it is, not a claim itself to be divine, but an order in which we can live well by our own powers in relation to others, wherein we can have a true common good that will exclude the highest things, including those addressed beyond religion, those of revelation. Religion refers to the human initiative. Revelation refers to divine initiative. So, mysticism and philosophy are the logical and experimental ends of the human beings in their cities, whereby they contact and understand what is the origin and end of what they are. The real motive for this effort, however, is properly and freely to respond to the gift of our existence. We're to respond to God, as Plato said in the Laws, by singing, dancing, sacrificing. And in the light of Revelation, these are the most interesting words. They recall ritual and sacrifice. They also make us wonder whether Revelation itself is an indication of what has perplexed the human race from the beginning. And by the way, I don't mean Revelation, when I've said it a few times, not the book of Revelation, Revelation, the revealing of God, the revealing of God in the universe. We say that that's an indication of what has perplexed the human race from the beginning, namely that it's a proper way to worship God. Or is it? And even more, would humans be expected to be able to formulate this way on their own powers? The history of religions in its incredible variety can at some level be said to be a record of these human efforts of ours in the order of religion. This multiplicity and variety is why I think Strauss reminded us that Revelation transcends and directs religion precisely as piety, that is, as the response of God as to how adequately to worship Him. Catherine Pickstock has used the happy phrase that worship is the consummation of philosophy. And Eric Vogelin has remarked that Christianity is the philosophy itself in a state of perfection. It's Pickstock's phrase that hints best at the relation of philosophy, mysticism, and play for the spirit of worship. Indeed, to use Roman Gardini's phrase, the spirit of liturgy concerns not merely the love of wisdom, but the celebration of wisdom given to us and accepted by us as that to which our minds are ultimately directed. And there's a dogmatic framework in which we can formulate whether we're properly stating what we are about. The dogmatic structure is not itself God, but it points through itself to what is not yet ours, but is. Paradox alert. Ultimately, what surprises is not that things don't fit together, but how they fit together and our response to the order of things. The last words remain those of Chesterton. Do not look for the gods unless you want them. It annoys them very much. There we go. There's some thoughts. Let's take a little break. I'm going to get something to drink, and it's still freezing down here. My hands are absolutely frozen. Turn off the air conditioning, gets hot, and leave it on, and it's freezing. So we're freezing down here. So all of you, sit tight. Don't go anywhere. We're going to come back. We can have some discussion. And so let's just take a little tiny break. We'll end the radio show and go into the captain's cabin. So all of you, if you got to go, live long and prosper. Otherwise, sit tight. We'll see you right here.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid radio program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Hey folks, this is Scotty Roberts, and this is the Intrepid radio broadcast. I've been broadcasting for about 20 years now, covering such topics as science, politics, the paranormal, weird science, weird world history, archaeology, and the paranormal. Everything from ghosts to cryptids to creepy things that go bump in the night. So every week I bring you 3 new episodes. Come and join my channel and also be a patron to this site. So see the details below, and we'll see you here. Dave, I love you, brother.
I miss you too.
I miss you too, I heard.
Yep,
Did you guys hear that?
I heard that.
I miss you, Dave. Well, greetings and welcome back to the Captain's Cabin. We'll be here for a little bit yet tonight for a little taking down of the formal into the informal. I see I've got Field Guy. Lord Emperor Field Guy says his name. I've got him over in the wings hanging to get in. Folks, if you are here tonight and you're here right now, the radio show portion has ended, the official part of the show, and we are now in the informal part, the after show, the let's talk it up a little bit. And so if you want to call in, you can. Now's the time. You could do it during the show, but I'm formatted in such a way that I seem to have like an hour where I talk and then an hour where we come in and do this stuff. So here is the link if you want to come in. We've got about 35 minutes left before we call it a night here. And so I just pasted the link into the chat room if you want to call in. And here's Field Guy. How you doing, Fieldy?
Doing good.
Right
I figured I would sneak in before we got the filibusters tonight.
The fellow busters?
Yes.
So what's going on? What's on your mind?
Not a whole lot. Just snuck in. I didn't even know if you were doing a show. I snuck in at the end. I was like, is he doing a show tonight?
Yeah. Yeah, I put out a sometimes I don't get the notice out till real late.
Wow.
And I wasn't sure if I was going to make it to do a show tonight, which is a sad state of affairs, but I like to stay on some kind of regularity. But
there's fiber for that.
Yeah, really. Mix that in with my drink. So yeah, I did get a post out, but at the last minute, the last half hour before the show. So
I don't really check Facebook a whole lot. When I do, I'm like 6 days behind.
Yeah, and YouTube should be sending them out as well to everybody who's a member.
I mostly get them. Sometimes I'll get them. It'll say like 9:05, 9:10.
Oh, There have been times I have actually set up the show for that, only because I'm trying to make a when I post something and I want it to post on Facebook from StreamYard, I can't within a half an hour. I can't do it. I can make the post, but I can't make a change or anything. So I sometimes push the start time out a few minutes, or if I know I'm going to be later. But
I don't
it's
post
all
anything to Facebook, so I don't know about
junk.
that.
I got to get back into doing real radio where I don't have to do nothing except show up and talk.
All right,
got
who wants to make
producers
me
to do
rich?
all
I'll
that
make a
stuff.
radio station.
There you go. Yeah, let's do it.
I know a bunch of DJs down here, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's as you know so well, podcasting is podcasting. You can do it whenever you want, and everybody and their redheaded second stepsister knows how to podcast and has got one since the pandemic, especially. So it's who hangs on and who does what. That's why I take great pride in saying I've been doing this for 24 years. I started in 2000. Yeah, 2000. And doing radio as opposed to podcasting. Nobody really knew what podcasting was in 2000. And you could simulcast on YouTube, but you had to upload videos and stuff. It was a very different game back then. So 24 years ago. God, that's a quarter of a century ago. It's crazy.
I used to call radio stations. I have the tape somewhere.
Yeah. We were on...
I got to figure out how to upload them.
I was with a friend of mine who was doing radio already down out of Oklahoma. And he would broadcast out of, I think it was KOMA, I want to say, in Oklahoma City. And we did a show once a week down there, Sunday nights. So it was paranormal-based radio. And we were doing this before we were doing paranormal radio before paranormal radio was paranormal radio. You had Art Bell, and that was pretty much it. And who was fantastic at it.
I still listen to him on YouTube. There's a channel with all his shows, and even the Midnight in the Desert that he did after he left.
Yep, that was after he left. Mm-hmm. I think what was so cool back then, there used to be a mystique about broadcasting. If you were a ham radio operator, you could get voices from around. There's somebody from around the world I can talk to in real time. When I was a kid growing up, that was just the stuff of fantasy. And so doing radio back in the 90s and 2000, that was really, it was a bit revolutionary to do it by yourself without a radio station, because it was, how do you broadcast your message out there? How are you going to get it out there? Internet wasn't quite as sophisticated as it is now. And so as the internet grew and everybody could do their own radio station. We had one. Rocky and John and I had a radio station together. Then Rocky had his own, and so on and so on and so on. And a lot of you have watched that happen over the years. So the mystique is gone out of it because everybody can do it. And that's what, you've got your pioneers who were before me doing stuff in this and podcasting. Then I got into it when hardly anybody was doing it. And I was doing radio, and we had to insist you had to be radio show, not a podcast. Podcast, that's for amateurs. We're a radio show, we'd say. And that's what set us apart. And so we were very prideful about being on radio. And we took great pride in it, let's put it that way. And so then it only became the last few years where I said, yeah, I do a radio show on Odyssey Radio, but I'm also a podcaster. And the only problem you get with calling yourself a podcaster, I know I was in a very small political argument with debate. Somebody who came into one of my posts, I see I see you're one of those podcasters. Because they saw I had a radio show and all that. I said, well, frankly, I said, I've been doing it for 22, 23 years. I said, I wouldn't call myself just another one of those podcasters. And she was trying to degrade my political opinion based on the fact, oh, you're just one of those podcasters. So
I hate people like that.
yeah, Chuck, we had IRC that we did. We ran the chat rooms. Said the IRC chat rooms. I don't know if you were ever part
Professor,
of that.
request a song. I
What's
found
that?
some more. I found some more 8 tracks.
Jethro Tull. Songs from the Wood.
Got a few of them. I got about 20 of them right now. I found.
Yeah, long time caller, first time listener. Can I request a song? Yeah, that's the way it was back then. So, Chuck,
Professor
yeah,
would-
you helped Wiccan Vixen, Nancy Planetta,
He would
to do a
pick-
lot of her podcasts that long ago. Yep.
I bet you Professor would pick In the Garden de la Vida.
Maybe. I don't know.
You know, that's
I
like a
don't know
third.
that one.
That's like a 26-minute song
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be a
because
song.
of the instrumental. In the
Yes.
Garden de la Vida. You know that song? Yeah.
Yeah. Chuck, I don't know if you, by the way, knew me around the same time because I that's where I met Nancy. Wiccan Vixen was back in the IRC channels. And my moniker was Spook Boy back in those days. Back in
It's the T-shirt.
97, 98, 99, 2000, right around in there. So you were Desert Rat. Yes, I know you very well from those days. I did not make that connection. I didn't know that. You may have told me once before and it went by me. But, yep, I remember Desert Rat very well from the IRC days. Those were fun times.
What's IRC?
I couldn't tell you what it means. Chuck could tell you what it means. I had Merc. I had MIRC because I was on a Mac. But there was IRC a long time ago. What did IRC stand for, Chuck? But it was chat. It was like computer screen chat. Without you didn't have pictures. You didn't have visuals like this. No audio. Internet radio chat. Oh, that's what it meant. IRC. Internet radio chat.
Who knew? I didn't know there was a thing that's podcasting until about maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell's podcasting?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it was fun when we were doing it. If you remember Chuck Thurston, the guy I did radio with, is somebody whose name I rarely invoke anymore. Lanlem Fear, if you remember that name. He and Nancy Planetta and I were pretty close. And who else was in with Lan and I? It was Nancy mostly from the past, those days. And yeah, we had our quite serious. When I say people have falling outs, you know, guys should bury the hatchet or do that. No, there was a lot about this person that he created a very bad situation.
Some people are not meant to be reconciled with.
Yeah, and he was very good at what he did, though. Excellent at radio, at television production, filming, photography, all the stuff. He was fantastic at it. And he just went away that I'm not going to badmouth him on here, other than to say there were some things that he did that we had a big falling out. And I said, that's it. I cannot. And he was my friend, and I stood for him as my friend. I defended him. And there were times even after the big break where I kind of missed him. And then I kept getting reminded by him why I couldn't be a friend. The last time we really had a conversation was, it was before Rowan was born. So over 12 years ago. Rainey was pregnant with Rowan. I remember where we lived and conversations I had with him. And I just said after that, I said, I can really no longer talk to you. So it's been that long ago, 12 years probably. So
Well,
that's
get that
Chuck. I was
poison
only
out the way.
mentioning him for Chuck's sake. that he probably remembers him too.
Code word ass wipe.
Yeah, kind of. And so yeah, I'm going to leave that one alone. And there are some other people I know that know him that have run into him. Somebody I met. Do you remember? There was a woman. I'm not going to name her. She comes in though, Catherine, and she would come in, and she had some experiences with him, and some bad experiences. And he had one very interesting UFO video, Chuck Thurston. You can't debunk that one. It's not debunkable. He was on the show Sightings with it. They had that UFO film, but and that was at least that was close to 20 years ago. But Catherine had some problems with him, and she was looking him up online to try to vet him because he was officially tied into their city and stuff like that with some things. And she looked him up and got my name. That's how she found me and found this broadcast. And we got to talk. She said, "Do you know so-and-so and so-and-so and such and such?"
Inagata Devita.
What?
Inagata Devita.
Inagata Devita.
My Iron Butterfly on Amazon Music.
What's that?
You gonna get this man a copyright? You playing that?
Yeah, don't spoil my copyright.
That's the last thing you need. YouTube's like, he's doing it again.
Exactly.
I think you only have like a 5-second window before they do that.
Delaney Pearl Jones is here. How you doing, Delaney?
I don't know. You said the professor would probably play Inagata Devita. And
Well, it's a 26-minute song. That's his filibuster.
I love how I get all the crap.
Well, you played it.
No,
Yeah,
but I mean about being the filibuster. I get all the. He's worse than I am.
I've never said you were a filibuster.
No, you have not. But he likes to try to paint me as the one who is.
But I've been on the professor's YouTube channel. He has some interesting thoughts. So at least he has his ramblings make sense majority of the time.
Yeah.
So
Chuck, I want to say to Chuck Thurston, I think he was a little more than a flake. He was a brilliant. I'd say he was a brilliant criminal. He was. What was that? What did I miss, Jason?
I said, stop talking about the professor like that.
Oh yes, I can't help myself.
Is he a flake too?
A brilliant flake.
Brilliant criminal.
Yes. Now he was. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything untoward because, not that I couldn't, but I don't want to have to prove it. And if I had to, so in defamation cases, the onus is on that person to prove that what was said about them is untrue. So
that's why you use code words.
Hey, Valerie.
He's as fruity as a loop.
I didn't even see Valerie. No, I'm seeing her say goodnight.
I started to pull everything up to call in, not with Inagata Devita, but when you started talking about radio broadcasts
and
actual radio broadcasting and, AM and ham and all that stuff. So the organization that I work for actually runs what is called it's called Mars.
Okay.
And it's the basically
the professor's here, by the way.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's what it's the neighborhood.
It's called Mars, and it's the military airways something. Anyways, it's basically the radio patch to where you can patch into the amateur radio system, and they can assist in sending of military messages, across the globe. It used to be during Vietnam, you could go to a Mars station on a base, what they call a Mars station, and you could make a phone call home. And it was essentially a phone to radio to phone patch that they would do. And there's it's a military, gosh, I'm trying to remember what it is, and I'm afraid to minimize this, but pretty nifty system that operates on all the AM radio station, the amateur radio stations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you talk about global bounce. You're hearing broadcasts or people coming in from across the world. You can get that atmospheric bounce going on with radio. It's pretty interesting stuff, actually.
That's neat. That's kind of cool.
Oh, there he is.
Is he here?
Yeah.
I'm not looking.
There's hey,
I'm
Prop.
glad you're here because I'm going to step away for a minute
Right,
out of necessity.
Just
You
this
guys
real
take
quick.
over. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
You've got a little
back and
Ethereum and Materium just right there on the just brush it off the
Right here.
yeah. Right there on the upper mustache, right there on the nostrils, little Materium and Ethereum.
I think he's trying
That's
to say you were snorting something.
That's a Bulgarian.
It could
That was a
be the
reference to
donut.
my comment on Scotty's post earlier today. I think he left a line of Ethereum or Materium on the table.
Did you see the image I put up there?
Oh, you put an image up?
Yeah, there was the whole thing was, Scotty was going on about all the problems with, whether he's getting tagging people and he can't get his stuff tagged because he's being shadow this or banned that and God knows what else is going on. And I just said, no, it's simply because you're having Jason on and he's on every goddamn watch list around the planet. And one of my favorite ones about that is the picture I posted was it's two very young girls and they're very cute, but they're very young and they're looking and one's pointing and the other one's whispering in the ear and says, I hear he's on several government watch lists.
Oh shit, that's hilarious. I'm probably not on American government watch lists. After duking it out with a Chinese company trying to set up next to the airbase, I'm probably on a few Chinese watch lists.
Well, there was a show. There's a guy that I think I played it last week when we were on the show. I played that clip from Scott Adams, the Dilbert cartoon guy.
Yeah.
And he's been canceled and shut down. And just like everybody else, from Carlson to Jones to Brand to God knows Pick'em, that's been banned and shut down, they've all come back with a fucking vengeance. And they are now doing even better than they were when they were in the lame mainstream media model of old.
Yeah.
So Scott's gotten, he's got to the point, he's always been provocative. And Fieldy, by the way, I appreciate that compliment you tossed my direction earlier. That was nice to hear that somebody actually listens to it and goes, I think there might be something there. I'm just not sure. But
if I listen enough, I'll hear stuff.
Well, heck, most of the time you post, I'm in a spot where I can't sit and listen. Don't have the time to devote the attention to it.
Well, I'm changing the model. I've been making a lot of shorts from the shows that I've been doing with various folks. It's weird. I'll fire up the Thursday night and Saturday night show, and we'll go on for 3, 4. Our longest is 7 hours.
I think I was in that when I fell asleep and I woke up. It's like 5 a.m. He's like, "You still on?"
And what's really wild is the stats on viewership and duration and all that are highest on the longest, which is kind of blowing me away. But
that's weird.
What I'm finding is that
that's why I put on a sweater.
Oh yeah, you I see your nipples.
overnight you
nipple.
get the most people, because I used to do like from midnight till 3 a lot of times. You'll get the insomniacs, you'll get the people from like UK, you'll get the Filipino people. The longer you stay on and the longer the time frame is, you'll get a lot of those views.
Well, there's actually a little bit of science and kind of logic behind that, and that is a lot, and this is what happens with Rogan and a number of Daniel Jones. These guys will go on and they'll have very interesting guests. Now, what they'll do is they won't have a panel; they'll have a conversation with someone.
Right.
And the logic and science behind it is that people will put on these long-form conversations in the background, and they'll do that as something.
That's how I do my drive to work. That's how I do my drive to work every day. I'll either have Rogan on or I'll do the Sean Ryan show. And it's a conversation. And I think when it's conversational versus a panel, it's almost like you were in the room with the conversation.
Yeah.
So it's a little more digestible. When you have like 12 people on the screen, it starts to become kind of a cacophony of
it's a fucking free for all, and that's difficult to manage as a host, let alone being engaged in any part of the conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
The psychology behind it is that people do it not only like what you're mentioning, Jason, but they do it also because they're kind of alone and they like to hear other people talk. They don't have to participate. They get up and they putz about and do things, and I do that personally myself. But
so do I.
What I'm doing now is focusing on. I've been fortunate enough in that the people I've had on, we end up with some very interesting conversations, and it might be 20, 30 minutes out of the 3 or 4 hours. So I'm now moving to a recorded model, and I'm going to be snipping and clipping segments that are much more digestible, and they'll be in parts where if you want, there'll be a playlist. You can listen to the whole thing if you want. But the software I'm using has got an expert system, which is what I call AI. And all these people freaking out about AI. I had to smack some people down the other day.
Skynet.
Today even.
Skynet.
People everybody's worked up about this shit, and it's simply because they have no fucking idea how it works. All they listen to is the must, fuss, sex, sizzle, hype, and hyperbole. And
I
it's
just
all
like
a bunch
to
of
joke about
bullshit.
Skynet.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not that there aren't systems that are gathering data, and this kind of goes back to the point I was trying to make with what Scott Adams said today on his show, and about Scotty having trouble and everybody being on a watch list. You get to a point where the first thing you have to realize is you have to assume you're being listened to. You have to assume you're on the list.
Well,
and if you start from that premise, then you're not fearful anymore. You're not sitting there going, well, I got to be careful of what I say of this and say of that. And then that leads to what I was talking about with these people that have all been canceled.
Yeah.
They're now beyond being canceled.
Right.
They can say whatever the fuck they want because they've already been canceled. They've already been sidelined and pushed off to the nether regions of the interweb. But what's happened is the folks that have been, surveilling and listening and, watching and making a list and checking it twice, they've lost control of the interweb. They can't do anything more than they've already they've already done to the web, because it's pervasive. And that goes back to the other point about AI. We're about to see an AI bubble. Mark these words at this time, on this day, on this channel. AI is about to fall apart, and it's going to fall apart spectacularly.
Well, I tell you what,
we're going to see something very much akin to the .com bomb back at the turn of the millennium.
2008.
Yeah.
Well, it happened in 2002. I know, because I got my ass handed to it in it. Because I'm sitting there going, what are all these analysts telling us that these stocks aren't worth shit? This is the future. What the hell are they thinking? Mm-hmm. And they trashed the stock that I had in the company and a bunch of people. But my point is that it was a bunch of hype back then. It was a bunch of promise back then. It was a bunch of the same,
The internet.
again, fuss, muss, sex, sizzle, hype, and hyperbole that we're seeing with AI right now. AI will not survive in its current form. And these people that are going on about, oh, it's going to take our jobs and we're going to have a HAL 9000 Terminator singularity. It's like, boy, do you guys, whatever you're drinking, you need to change brands.
What are you
Because
doing,
none of
Professor?
the technology that is being used to create AI is not something that can result in that HAL 9000 Terminator singularity. It's not going to happen. It can't.
I wouldn't talk about
Because
that, Professor.
well, because
What are you doing,
science,
Professor?
What are you doing, Professor?
the science and physics that we currently have in our just dysfunctional knowledge base of what we call science and physics is not capable. It is a grit billiard ball model of shit bouncing off of each other, and that's not how the universe works. That's not how reality works. Going back to what you were talking about on the show, Scotty, the whole idea of frequencies, which thank you, Sarah, for chiming in on that.
Yes.
The whole idea of what we're going to see is a transformative disruption from the current physics model into what I'm calling frequency physics. Once they get into that, once they start recognizing that Tesla and Keeley and Maxwell and Heaviside and Whitehead and all the Dirac, all these guys knew, they figured out that all of the things we need is in the ether. All the energy we need is in the ether. All the water we need is in the ether. And all the ways in which we communicate is in that same ether. But that doesn't fit into the physics of today. Einstein was wrong, period. E equals mc squared not only has never resulted in any kind of invention, there's nothing you can attribute it to other than an exciting mental exercise. and what really exposed me or gave me the reality of what it was is that I recognized that E is energy, M is milk, C is coffee, and if you square it, you'll get energy. That's the value of the whole Einsteinian bullshit.
But what if C was cream?
Yeah,
well, you gotta have coffee. I mean, you got milk already. I mean, if you're not gonna, if you put milk and cream together, you're gonna have more of a lactose problem than something else.
God, that explains why I'm able to function when I drive to work.
Which I'll tell you something. Some people, I had a dietitian after my heart stuff. Do you drink milk? And they're going through a questionnaire. Do you drink milk? I said, yes, I do. What kind of milk do you drink? Do you drink D, A, B, whatever, skim? I said, skim. Ugh. I said, might as well take water and dip a white crayon into it and let it soak. I said, I drink vitamin D milk, whole milk. And she goes, wow. She actually made that face. Wow. How can you drink that? That's so bad for you. I said, I only have about 2 glasses of it a week. I said, so I it's like, alcohol will kill you. But if you only have 1 shot a month, it's not going to do a whole lot to you. So, I love milk.
Well,
I love
the
whole
thing
milk.
about
Just as
the thing
we're
about
talking about milk.
Yeah, well, the thing about substances is that they too are frequencies.
Yeah.
All of us, everything that we are is
caffeine.
The entire reality is frequency based. So if you
excuse me.
What'd she say?
It's all me. Not you. Caffeine, she says.
I need some caffeine. Where's it at?
So the whole model of what we do with not only the technology and the AI shit, mark my words, we're going to see a bubble that's going to collapse, and what it'll end up being are individually programmed expert systems that the user, the owner, will be defining. Part of the problem that it has is right now the internet or the AI systems, they've run out of data. They scoured the internet and they picked up whatever they could. And fortunately, there's a lot more out there than what's just on the internet.
I actually saw a good movie. Speaking of personal use, we saw this movie the other night. We thought, let's watch a movie, and this new one popped up that I went, just because I'm not a big Jennifer Lopez movie watcher. You know, doesn't do it for me. And then when they've got her in a sci-fi action film, I'm like, even more. Jennifer Lopez in a sci-fi action film, I don't know.
It's Atlas, right?
What?
Atlas,
yes. And we watched that, and I actually thought it was really well done. And a big portion of the movie's theme was in this science fiction setting. She has to put in the ear thing, which connects you to your AI system and all, and she refused to do it for a lot of the plot reasons, the heavy duty plot. And and it was really well done. It had kind of a HAL 9000 computer in it that was a little more personable than HAL was, you know. But
that was in like a suit that he had, right?
it was a suit. It was like a suit ship. It was a little bigger inside the suit, like you had consoles around you and stuff. But
like a TARDIS bigger on the inside, or
what's that?
Like a TARDIS bigger on the inside, or
no. It was where you had like a panel in front of you, you know, rather than you're fit into this suit. She's in the suit, and she can put her feet in the pedals and stuff like that, and it controls it to a certain extent. But she's like in a mini room, is what it's like. Okay. And so it was pretty cool. But she had to integrate with this thing, and not integrate. It was what did they call it? It's where you had to connect up and you had to hook up with the AI, and she wasn't going to trust it. And so Avatar Exostructure, says Chuck Thurston. There you go. And so it was pretty cool movie, and it kind of dealt with some of that from a very wildly science fiction point of view, but it kind of worth watching. It was kind of fun.
Huh.
So
I have seen it popping up, and I have been hesitant to watch it because, quite frankly, it's J-Lo.
Same reasons. J-Lo and science fiction action film just don't seem to mix for me. J-Lo, I don't go out of my way to watch her films. Sorry, J-Lo. I know
I didn't even know she did films
tonight, and you'll be offended by that. But
I didn't even know she did films. I thought she was just a booty shaker on a stage with a lip sync.
Yeah, what was it? She did films, these kind of cheap, what I would call cheap theatrical release Hallmark type of movies. You know, I'm in love with the maid or something like that. Maid in New York or something. Where she's a maid.
Did a couple of films with Ben Affleck.
Yeah. And
I think that was Made in Manhattan.
Whatever it was.
She got big by doing that Selena movie.
The Selena movie?
The Selena, the dead Latin singer. She played Selena.
She was a lot older than Selena, wasn't she?
And I think they were about the same age. I don't know, but that's what put her on the.
J-Lo's been kicking it for a while.
That's true. She was around a long time ago.
And a booty.
Remember the infamous green dress at the Oscars? It was kind of like tied around the back of the neck and came down, and
that's what created Google Images and reverse search engine.
Yeah,
look it up. That's why Google Images was created, because of the J-Lo green dress.
Oh, really?
If you type in Google Images, that's what it tells you. That's because so many people tried to image that dress. That's why they created it, for that reason.
Really?
Because I've done reverse searches on pictures to see if they're fake or AI or real or whatever.
Yeah.
Some that you can't tell AI stuff. You can't tell if it's so realistic. You can't tell half the time.
I know some of them you can't. Some of them I can. You look at them and you go, I see a lot of these big-breasted women pictures coming from some
That's what they do it with.
And you look at it and you go, that's AI. So
no, that's T in your eye.
That's
okay.
T in your eye.
How does anybody not recognize when stuff's AI on those images? I honestly don't understand that.
Well, it's primarily because people have been inundated with fake shit for too many years.
Yep.
And this goes back to my other point about being canceled and all of the shit that's going on, and I'll just tag this onto the AI piece to what you were talking about earlier, Scotty. All of those mystics, mystic arts, mystery schools, the Blavatskys, the Steiners, all of the knowledge and information that has been kept secure by all of these mystery schools for thousands of years is about the reality of our existence and how much power, what we would consider power today, we actually have just innately within our own being, within our consciousness. The ability to have what are called in the category of psychic skills and abilities is a natural inherent part of consciousness. But just like all other types of skills, various people have everybody has a different degree of access innately to those skills. So like somebody who's big and tall and they can play basketball. Scotty and I would go out there and give them a run for money, but they kick our ass at the end. We are not genetically or innately gifted to go out and play with a LeBron James, for example. But my point is this, going back to being canceled, going back to being on a watch list, it has now gotten to the point where all of the shit that happened, particularly over the last 4 or 5 years with the spam-demic and J6 and all of the hokey-pokey crap that's going on in the courts. I mean, we're looking at a plethora of inept, incompetent bullshit. People are now seeing that all of the crap, in fact, there's a big lawsuit, the Ninth Circuit Court last week finally affirmed in a lawsuit that was done, kicked up by the Los Angeles school districts, that the vaccine was not a vaccine. It was not a vaccine because it didn't do what vaccine
is supposed to do.
It's supposed to do. It didn't prevent contraction or dispensation. What's her name? I can't think of her name, but there's a huge court case that's going on right now against Pfizer because there was an internal employee who saw a bunch of shit and she came out as a whistleblower.
I'm so glad I took Moderna.
And Moderna and AstraZeneca have all come out and said, oh, yeah, our stuff does kind of maybe cause blood clots and myocarditis. And
maybe it does, yeah. Maybe you'll
and
die.
So what?
Dude, that's funny. I haven't heard a single thing about Moderna.
So what's happening? Yeah, well, it's coming apart and everywhere. Fauci got his ass handed to him last week. Had to finally admit that the distancing and the masks were not based on any science whatsoever. They just made it up. So what's happening is the truth is coming out to the point. I even know some people who had YouTube channels that had very large followings, and they've now moved over to Rumble, which is where I am as well. And they have, they're thinking about trying to sue, their class action suit against YouTube for canceling people for shit that eventually ended up being wrong.
Green dress.
Sorry to break in with that. There's the
Is that a sorry, not sorry on your end, Scott?
Yeah, sorry, but I make no apologies.
Yeah, I got that.
And of course, then there was the follow-up infamous green cape. So, not much for the imagination on that one.
That one I haven't seen before.
There's a couple of these. There's a front-on shot with her hips sticking out and all of that. And
now I've seen the booty video.
This one was better because it was much more revealing. But no, this was the dress. So that made her everybody hails back to. It's got to be
like,
20 years
boobs.
ago, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
2001, I think.
And she doesn't look much different than that now. So she's held her shape pretty well. Of course, when you're worth that kind of money, you can go to the gym quite often.
Didn't Tina Turner have her legs insured for like
something like
$1 million?
Yeah. For $1 million. Be worth
Well,
more than that today.
Did you see the Manscaped commercial where I forget his name? I think it was Nick Cannon, maybe. They insured his testicles for $10 million.
Wow.
And I saw this on a TV commercial, and I go, "Why is this on my TV? Like,
they
why
showed
do I
his
need to know this?"
scrotum?
Because it's a joke.
Yeah, probably.
No, it's a real thing. It's actually a real. They played it off as a joke, but it's a real thing.
No.
Serious.
Why is
I
he
went
have
on
his
the website.
testicles
They had it.
insured
I was
for
like,
so
"Let me
much
see
money?
this."
The joke with him and with even doing that is the fact that he has been highly prolific.
I
Uh,
don't know. I think it was Nick Cannon. It might have been somebody else. It might have
sense.
been one of these other rappers. But
I have no clue. What I
don't
do
know, some
know,
black
it's
dude saying it.
11:07, and I'm going to end the show. Professor, I hope you got all your points in because we're done. And
Yeah, well, there's
barged
always
in with
more.
J-Lo.
There's always more, as you know. So
Always.
we'll leave these nuggets where they are.
Well,
Yes,
somebody started a
and
live
insure him
stream.
for
Go all
$10 million.
night.
So,
Just remember, guys, when you're talking about lists and you're talking about being listened to and things like that, if you have a Alexa Echo or Hey Google or anything like that,
I don't.
take the time once a week, twice a month, something like that. Take the time as you're walking by through that room to say, "Hey, NSA agent, how are things going? How are you doing? Kids going okay? How'd the ball game go last night?"
that's right.
Because they're people too.
They
And they have lives and concerns and
You think
worries
they
and
want to be
dreams,
sitting
hope,
and listening to you all day.
just like us.
That's right.
Indeed.
Just like us. And on that note, we wish you all a very good night. Field guy, we'll see you later. Thanks for being here.
Later, Phil guy.
Thanks for having me.
See you, Fieldy.
And see you, Professor. Good to have
Later,
you
bro.
as always.
Thanks for letting me in and flap my yap. I appreciate it.
You betcha. And Jason, good to have you, brother.
Always a pleasure, and thanks for having me on and closing me out last after the professor. Just because I think that might, get his goat.
It's just to give you a little more time. See ya. All right, everybody else. And to you all, I want to say thank you for being here. Thanks for giving me your time. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll do it again on Wednesday. So stay tuned. Until then, live long and prosper.